The night shift at Black Ridge Penitentiary was designed to be predictable. Every door locked, every corridor monitored. Every inmate counted, yet sometime between the midnight head count and the 3 a.m. security sweep, one man vanished from a cell that was never opened. No alarms, no broken bars, no witnesses. Just an empty bed inside one of the most secure prison blocks in the country. Welcome to the verdict room, where we uncover the hidden stories behind the world's most dangerous prisons. Black Ridge Penitentiary was built for one purpose: control. Located far from major cities and surrounded by miles of dry terrain, the prison had been designed in the late 1980s during a period when correctional facilities across the country were expanding rapidly. Officials wanted a facility that could house the most disruptive inmates, gang leaders, violent repeat offenders, and prisoners who had already attempted escapes elsewhere. The architecture reflected that mission. Thick concrete walls reinforced with steel mesh, motion sensors embedded in ceilings. Hallways arranged in a radial design so guards could see down multiple corridors at once. Every cell door operated electronically from a central control room known as the bubble. Inside Black Ridge, the system was supposed to be airtight. The prison population, however, operated under a very different system. Behind bars, power rarely belonged to the guards alone. Like many high-security institutions, Black Ridge had its own inmate hierarchy. Alliances formed along lines of gang affiliation, geography, and reputation. Older prisoners mentored younger ones, enforcing unwritten codes that often mattered more than official prison rules. Control of the cell blocks wasn't always visible, but it was always present. In cell block D, one inmate had quietly risen to the top of that hidden hierarchy. Marcus Hale had arrived at Black Ridge 6 years earlier. He wasn't the loudest inmate or the most physically intimidating. In fact, many guards initially described him as unusually calm. But other prisoners watched him differently. Hale listened more than he spoke. He observed guard routines, studied shift changes, and memorized the rhythms of the facility. Within months, inmates were coming to him for advice, conflicts, contraband deals, even protection arrangements. In prison culture, knowledge is power, and Hale was collecting it. Over time, rumors began circulating through the block that Hale understood the prison better than the people who ran it. At first, the guards dismissed those whispers. In high-security prisons, inmates often exaggerate their influence. But a few small incidents started to raise eyebrows. Cameras in Block D occasionally lost signal for a few seconds at a time. Nothing dramatic, just brief static interruptions. Maintenance crews blamed aging wiring. Then there were the locked doors. More than once, officers reported that a cell door had briefly failed to respond to the control panel before correcting itself seconds later. Again, the system logs showed nothing unusual. Technically, everything was functioning normally. Still, veteran guards began to feel that something was wrong. Black Ridge had always been strict about procedures, but recently the routines seemed almost predictable, as if someone on the inside had mapped them down to the minute. That suspicion grew stronger when investigators later reconstructed what happened during the week leading up to Hale's disappearance. In the days before the escape, Hale's behavior had changed. He declined recreation yard time twice in a row, a rare decision for someone with his influence. Instead, he stayed inside the cell block, spending long hours reading or quietly speaking with other inmates near the stairwell. To most officers, it looked harmless, but security footage later showed something more interesting. During those conversations, Hale often stood near the wall where electrical conduits ran behind the concrete. The night of the escape started like any other. At 11:45 p.m., the evening count confirmed that all 96 inmates in cell block D were present. The count was logged and signed off by 2 officers, following standard procedure. At midnight, the corridor lights dimmed automatically, leaving only the low emergency lighting that illuminated the walkway between cells. Most inmates went to sleep, but somewhere inside Block D, a plan that had taken months to develop was about to unfold. At 1:17 a.m., a camera covering the east corridor flickered. For exactly 8 seconds, the feed froze. When it returned, everything looked the same. But investigators later discovered that during those 8 seconds, something critical had happened. Hale's cell door opened. No alarms triggered. No override commands were recorded in the control system. The door simply slid open. How that happened remains one of the most debated details of the case. One theory suggested that someone inside the maintenance department had tampered with the control software months earlier, inserting a hidden command that could unlock a single door without logging the action. Another theory pointed toward the prison's aging electrical system, arguing that a precisely timed power fluctuation might have temporarily disrupted the lock mechanism. But neither explanation fully accounted for what happened next. Because once Hale stepped into the corridor, he didn't run. He walked, slowly, calmly. Security footage shows him moving through the dim hallway with surprising confidence, turning corners, without hesitation, as if he had memorized every camera angle. He avoided blind spots, paused when patrol routes passed nearby. And within minutes, he reached the service stairwell at the far end of the block. That stairwell was supposed to be locked. But it wasn't. Somewhere along the way, the prison's layered security system had quietly failed, one step at a time. Hale descended to floors, emerging near a section of the prison rarely seen by inmates, the maintenance corridors. These narrow concrete passageways ran behind the walls, allowing technicians to access electrical systems, plumbing lines, and ventilation shafts without entering inmate areas. Most prisoners didn't even know they existed, but Hale did. And according to investigators, he knew them well enough to navigate through them in near darkness. By the time the next guard patrol passed through cell block D at 2:30 a.m., Hale was already gone. The empty cell wasn't discovered until the 3 a.m. count. At first, officers assumed it was a paperwork error. Maybe Hale had been moved earlier and someone forgot to update the log. But within minutes, the realization spread across the control room. Marcus Hale had disappeared. The prison immediately entered lockdown. Search teams combed every corridor, every yard, every storage area. Floodlights illuminated the perimeter, while armed guards took positions along the outer walls. For hours, officials believed Hale might still be inside the facility. Then investigators found the maintenance hatch. Hidden behind a stack of equipment in a utility room was a narrow exit leading into the prison's drainage system, an underground network designed to carry rainwater away from the compound. The hatch showed signs of tampering. From there, the tunnel stretched nearly half a mile beyond the prison walls before connecting to a dry creek bed outside the perimeter fence. It was the one route security planners had never considered an escape risk. By sunrise, the impossible had happened. Marcus Hale was gone. The investigation that followed exposed a series of uncomfortable truths about life inside Black Ridge Penitentiary. Over the next 3 months, federal investigators interviewed dozens of guards, technicians, and inmates. They reviewed thousands of hours of surveillance footage and inspected every inch of the facility's infrastructure. What they discovered wasn't a single failure, it was a chain of them. Outdated camera systems that could briefly freeze without triggering alerts. Maintenance access points that were rarely inspected. Guard routines that had become predictable after years of repetition. But perhaps the most troubling discovery involved information. Somewhere along the way, Hale had learned far more about the prison's internal systems than any inmate should. Records showed that he had spent months working in the prison library, requesting books on electrical engineering and building infrastructure. At the time, it seemed harmless, but investigators now believe Hale used that knowledge to understand how the prison systems worked, and more importantly, how they could fail. Despite nationwide searches and multiple reported sightings, Marcus Hale was never officially captured. Some believe he escaped the country, others suspect he built a new identity somewhere far from the prison that once held him. Inside Black Ridge Penitentiary, however, his disappearance changed everything. Security systems were upgraded, guard patrol patterns were randomized. Entire sections of the maintenance tunnels were permanently sealed. Yet even today, correctional officers who worked that night still talk about the moment the count came up short. Because in a prison designed to eliminate every weakness, one inmate studied the system long enough to find them all. And sometimes, the most dangerous thing behind prison walls isn't violence, it's patience.